Hey everybody, welcome to Away Games. I'm Kevin McCaffrey, and remaining after the deadline, we have decided to stand pat, both myself and Adam Mamawala over there. We're buying and selling, I guess.
Hey, let's let it ride. We added Ken in a time of
Mm-hmm.
need. We've now subtracted Ken. Ken's always here for us. Ken,
Yes.
the Tommy Listella of the pod.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that's what he said. I listened to the
mhm.
podcast last week. I listened to my podcast that you guys were doing. How about that? That's fun. But I agree with you that I would rank Ken is above a Listella. A very good platoon situation is what I think we have going on here.
Yeah, I don't recall if we said this actually on the podcast or before we started recording, but I'm actually wearing the same shirt now that I was then. I have washed it in between, but
I
this
believe
is
it.
this is big like Sammy Sosa batting practice vibes. For the people who are listening to this, I'm wearing a Cubs blue shirt with cutoff sleeves, which is just vintage 1998 BP Sammy, just hitting balls onto buildings.
Letting you know what's under there.
Oh yeah,
Just letting everything breathe as much as you can. And yeah, so this is an episode with more going on than usual because the Cubs are still playing good, and they've won one of the last three, but much of the last if you go back over
yeah.
time. They've been on a generally good run, and yesterday won 20-9 over the Reds. That's a game Marcus Stroman could have even won.
Oh man, yeah, what a weird it's everything feels very weird. Thinking back to when you and I last recorded, it would have been during that national series where things frankly looked pretty bleak. I mean, I don't recall if we recorded on that Tuesday or Wednesday, but at that time the Cubs were like 7 games under 500. It seemed like there was every reason to believe that they would be selling off again, and I do believe that you and I both asserted that going into that stretch with the Cardinals and White Sox for those 10 games, like the minimum really was I don't even know if 7-3 gets it done there. Like it really felt like they had to win 8 or 9 of those 10 games, which they did.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about razor thin margins there. I mean, the Mike Troutman game alone, where he
Hmm.
caught the ball that was literally the difference between a win and a loss, right there. That's the difference between the Cubs, even after all of that, being above or under 500 today. Because as we speak today, the Cubs are 54 and 53, 4 games back in the NL Central, and of that wild card, which I still hate. There's just too many teams in playoffs now
Yeah.
in baseball. Why do we play 162 if you're going to have this many friggin' teams make it? But the Cubs are 3.5 games back of the wild card over there. So, I guess it's good to do a little reset about where the Cubs are going forward because after the trade deadline, which we'll get into the pieces they both acquired and gave away. But this is what we're looking at now because this is what the team is. There's not the old like, oh, now it's a waiver system trade deal.
Right.
This is it. This is what we got.
It is what the team is unless other people are DFA'd and or cut. So just be on high alert, Tucker Barnhart,
Yeah.
because if it can happen to Mancini, it can happen to you.
Well, that's true. Tell me about that little transaction.
Well, Trey Mancini was DFA'd, which was surprising to me only because David Ross has been so insistent on keeping him in lineups.
He started a couple days ago. Yeah.
He started 2 days ago. He started
Yeah.
the day that Candelario was acquired before that game.
Right.
And at the time, I think a lot of people were speculating, maybe Amaya gets sent back down, or I don't personally, I did not expect Mancini to be DFA'd. I think he needed to in the same way
Mm-hmm.
that Hosmer needed to,
Mm-hmm.
but I do feel like Ross. I don't know if it's just this implicit bias because Ross was like a veteran guy for so long that he feels this like kinship and respect towards other veteran guys, whether it's Hayward being in the lineup all the time, or Mancini, or Hosmer, or really anybody who has like stayed in the lineup despite not performing well. And it really sucks. I think the vibe ultimately on Cubs Twitter and everywhere else was like, look, we all would have loved for this to have worked out for Mancini. He seems like a lovely guy. He's overcome a
Mm-hmm.
lot. He from all accounts was like a great clubhouse guy. But that's frankly, that's not enough
It's not
to
an it's
on a team.
It's not enough, I think, is the right way to put it, because the guys you mentioned, Mancini, probably especially, and then Tucker Barnhart, who is still with the team right now, one of the Cubs' three catchers on the team on the current 26-man roster, and Eric Hosmer earlier in the season, all have been, people have said everyone around them was like plus plus clubhouse guys they really like, that are leaders in there,
Mhm.
that are good dudes. And I think the fact that the production isn't enough is a good way to put it, because when the Cubs are who they are, which is 54 and 53 this deep into the season, the team's not that good. Like, we're
Mhm.
having a great time lately. We've beaten up on the worst teams in baseball for a couple weeks, and the team, I think, we've been saying, as people who are pessimistic about what the roster looked like coming into the year, I think I've been pretty consistent saying, even when things are going real bad a month ago, that the team's better than this. I do
Yeah.
think, the team we have put together is better than this, but I think these clubhouse dudes and the vibe in that way, the leadership in the clubhouse, is important when there's just not an overwhelming amount of talent there. Like,
Mhm.
you have to win at these sort of ethereal margins of the game. So I understand them trying to keep guys like that around. Now it's like, why don't you build the whole plane out of the black box? Can't build the
Right.
whole team out of guys who are nice, who are
Yeah.
just like, and who aren't hitting. And so we had Mancini here, who, was making some money and now has been DFA'd. And I fully do not assume that Trey Mancini is going to be picked up by another team. So he could
Right.
very well just land in AAA and be there. And we could see Mancini, and if that's the case, we could see Mancini again, depending on injury, depending
Right.
on, if he gets hot in AAA or something. So yeah, but I think this is when you're deciding, you are at least sort of going for it, as the Cubs did with
Mhm.
their couple of trade acquisitions. I think this is the move you have to make. This guy's not playing. He hasn't been playing well. It's time to fill the roster with your best 26 finally. It's August, and Mancini's on 2 years,
Right.
$14 million was the contract there.
Yeah, which I didn't hate at the time, and I don't think you felt negatively about it. I think a lot of us were hoping Cubs might go after Jose Abreu, or obviously, I mean, it goes without saying that a lot of us, or at least folks like us, wanted Anthony Rizzo to get an offer. But
Right.
yeah, and as for Barnhart, and obviously it's hard to complain after a game where the team scores 20 runs, but it is a little tough when granted, Steele was a little bit wild in that inning that the Reds got those 2 runs, but like three balls got by Barnhart, and I'm told that he's mainly there for defense and leadership. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
if it's kind of like a trying too hard sort of thing, or he's in his head. But also, when he came up to the plate in that big inning, in the first inning, I think it was like first and second, 1 out, and like before he even swung the bat, in my head, I'm already marking down 4-6-3 double play, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. And it's a little bit like Hayward at times, where you just knew, you were like, the only thing that will surprise me is something productive here.
Yeah, there's no offense to Tucker Barnhart. There just hasn't been in any real way in a very long time. So we know that, and I think ultimately, when you get down to it, the best 26 on this team probably does not include him. He seems like a good guy, seems like he works with pitchers well. He's a Gold Glove winner, but also, if you look at the metrics behind his defense, throwing arm, all this stuff, even framing, it doesn't look that impressive. So I think it's the Cubs are obviously really believe in this sort of just like pitcher whispering stuff. But if we really
Mhm.
believe in Yan Gomes that way, and Miguel Amaya is there as a backup, I do think that is ultimately going to be your pairing. I mean, I just don't think. I think you probably should have another bat in there instead of rostering Barnhart by the end of the year. But we're sitting here, we're behind. The Cubs are in the wild card behind 3.5 behind Milwaukee, who is sitting in the final wild card place, and Milwaukee's within a game of Philadelphia and San Francisco. So the Philadelphia, San Philadelphia would be the.
That's their couple name.
Yes, exactly. But San Francisco, Philadelphia, Milwaukee would be the wild card if the season ended today. And Arizona and Miami are also 2.5 games ahead of the Cubs, and the Padres are 1.5 back. In the division, the Cubs are 4 back of Cincinnati, with more to play against them tonight, and 3.5 back of Milwaukee. So that's where we sit here.
What feels more attainable to you? I mean, I think everybody obviously wants the division more so
Right.
than sneaking into a wild card, but where are you at in terms of like what feels more feasible?
I wasn't. The wild card feels much more feasible than it did to me a few weeks ago, but I would still say the division because it's close to the same amount of a distance as we speak here, 3.5 versus 4 games. That's the same thing. I and there's just the fact that there's just two teams to chase down, and that it's Milwaukee who can't hit really, and then Cincinnati, who is Cincinnati's an exciting team, and they're 59-50. The Cubs are Cincinnati's 59-50. The Cubs are 54-53. But Cincinnati didn't do enough at the deadline, I think, to strengthen that rotation, and they have been playing a little over their heads this year. And as we know, they're a really young team, and a lot of these players just haven't played this many games. So I think. For me, I still think it's the division because also in the wild card, San Diego bought a little bit. They strengthened the team a little bit, and San Diego's right there with that big roster. And we've been talking about the Cubs as run differential kings all year. San Diego's got really good run differential too. So even though the Cubs are behind, 5 teams, and San Diego's right behind them, I think. I would not at all be shocked to see the Padres.
I think I saw the other day that the Padres are 0-10 in extra inning games this year. Like that seems statistically almost impossible.
That is insane. And they just blew a crazy one against the Rockies the other day where they had to really go out of their way to do it. So I still think the division is where the focus mostly has to be. And if you end up somehow getting into that wild card, then great, I guess. But I mentioned the Brewers did not. They can't hit really. Their trade deadline was they got Carlos Santana from the Pirates, who isn't hitting great, but that's a guy who, every once in a while can put a bat on a ball. The Brewers got Mark Canha from the New York Mets. So Canha's having kind of a down year, but he's okay. I mean, those are both situations where they're upgrades for Milwaukee. And then the Brewers also got our old friend Andrew Chafin. So it's going to be too bad to see Chafin over there, I guess.
Yeah, I would have loved for the Cubs to have gotten Chafin back. Frankly, I would have loved for them to have gotten literally any lefty reliever. And I'm not going to freak out about Anthony Kay getting knocked around last night in a game where the Cubs are up by 15 runs. Your job there is to pound the strike zone. He didn't, was he walking people? He was just bad in general, but
I didn't see that part.
It's a little unfair to be getting on a guy for having a rough outing when the team's up by 15 runs. But it is very disappointing for the Cubs not to have added a lefty reliever. They did add a righty reliever whose name I still don't know how to pronounce.
No, because I've never seen
anyone say it.
I've never seen a last name like this, and this is not a critique of his last name, but it feels like they just erased the end of it. It feels like there should be more letters after where it ends. It's like
the Ellis Island did it.
Yes, Jose Cuas, I want to say, or Cuas. Yeah. It's Jose Cuas, and they got him from the Royals from our old friend Nelson Velasquez.
Yeah. Who, and I think you tweeted this from our X account at Away Games.
Gross, at Away Games.
So gross, yeah. Every time I see that logo, it makes me vomit a little bit in my mouth.
Yeah.
It's also funny though that the website is still Twitter. If you send someone a link, it still says twitter.com. It doesn't say x.com. I assume x.com is owned by Vin Diesel, but that's a different story.
I hope so. It does. Yeah.
But what was I talking about? I lost
just talking about Nelson Velasquez. I think I tweeted from our At Away Games pod account that I like Nelson. I think he should have had more of a shot up with the team this year because basically they just DFA'd Trey Mancini. Nelson Velasquez should have had the Trey Mancini at bats. I know he doesn't play first, but DHing as a right-handed hitter who hammered, who can hammer some lefties. And so Velasquez was good when he was up with the Cubs. We all remember the grand slam he hit against the Mariners in that comeback. I think he was OPSing at, I think he's going to end the year officially, depending on where you set the minimum, as the Cubs leader in OPS this year, well over 140. Because when he was up, he did hit well. When he was in AAA this year, year he did not hit as well. But I also think part of that is a guy who got some decent time at the major league level last year. He came up and then it's one of those things where you probably just feel like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. And not that he's not trying in AAA, but it's hard to maintain that sort of that focus. So I think I would have rather have seen Velazquez with genuine power. We know the on base is going to be low, but the slugging's really, I think it's there at a major league level. Would have liked to have seen him taking Mancini's at bats earlier, but all things considered, he wasn't going to get there. There was a crowd in the outfield. We know PCA's on his way. A lot of the Cubs' top prospects are other outfielders who've leaped Velazquez probably. So in this case, I think it's nice to see him go to Kansas City where he'll get a chance to shine.
Totally, yeah, and I know they sent him to AAA, but it would be shocking to me if he was not up with the Royals like fairly soon and probably for the rest of the season. And it would be cool to see him break out there. And obviously we're talking about different kinds of players, but it kind of reminds me of when the Cubs traded Jorge Soler for Wade Davis, and obviously Wade Davis is a caliber of pitcher who is far beyond Cuas or Cuas or Je ne sais
Jose.
But,
Je ne sais Cuas. Oui.
That's an obvious shirt for you.
Yes.
But that was a trade that was one of those rare ones that worked out exactly as it should have for everybody, right? The Cubs got a great closer for a year. The Royals got Soler, I think, leading the American League in home runs.
Didn't he hit 50 like 49? Like it was right there. Yeah. I think that's a perfect comp as far as like that was the rich man's version of this, you know. Sure. And Velazquez and Soler are even similar in the type of hitter they are, where it's big slugging percentage, right-handed bats, and Cubs get a reliever that, you know, it seems like they just back then. Do you remember when we didn't really have space in the outfield for Jorge Soler? We could find space for him now. He has 25 homers this year with Miami again.
Or space in the infield for Jeimer Candelario.
Absolutely, which was the thing, and we'll get to that in a second. But I'll tell you about. So we're happy for Nelson Velazquez going to Kansas City to get a shot. Probably just wasn't going to happen here, whether we like it or not. Our boy Jose Je ne sais Cuas has. This is how he. This is a rundown of what he's doing. Over 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. That's good. The sidearm delivery that he has is very much like our old friend Scott Efros in terms of the release point. How far it is towards third base is elite. I believe it was I think it was Brendan Miller, or it might have been our friend Brian Smith at Cub Prospects that I saw tweeting that, where he's in terms of release point, how far it is off to the side like that, that extreme. It's top 4 in the league, and Efros was another one. So he throws about 92, 93, which for a guy who's throwing sidearm, that's pretty hard for a guy who throws from that angle. Now, in terms of production, it's not there yet. He has a whip of the ERA is a little worse than league average this year. The whip is 1.6. You don't like that. He's walking 4.5 per 9, and and he's given up a lot of hits too, more than a hit an inning. So the things we can look for here, whiff percentage is good. If you pull up his Baseball Savant thing, that page is going to show you he gets swing and misses, and that's really about it as far as where you see that, and his fastball spin is elite. So maybe the Cubs see something they can do with him there, but he's going to be on the roster. He's optionable for next year too. So this is a guy who can sort of go back and forth to the minors this year and next.
Get him in the pitch lab, baby. The old pitch lab.
Oh, the pitch lab. Yep, our magic pitch lab. It'll fix him. So but that's what we're looking at. I like a good weird throwing angle, honestly.
Sure, absolutely. Now, before we break down the Candelario trade, you know, you and I have not talked here in a couple weeks. Give me some of the highlights for you in terms of like a lot happened. I mean, we had the comeback against the White Sox, where White Sox Twitter people were preemptively bragging, which, you know, they've never been burned by that before. Then we cut to the Fresh Prince meme.
Really great stuff watching. Yeah. I mean, White Sox social media is pretty bad, I would say. There's good people out there that that I will see that are like, you know, and they should be furious with their team right now. Sure. There was a couple of decent pieces they got in their sell-off yesterday. So Jake Berger for Jake Eater, his burger for Eater trade is interesting, but Jake Eater's an interesting piece. Whatever. There's some things that happen, but they should be furious with their ownership, management, all that. But
Right.
man, top 5 elite humorless social media following, I think, and watching them be so fucking cocky when their dog shit team was beating the Cubs early in the game, and then to watch that fall apart was amazing.
It fall apart immediately. They
It
went
was
up
so
7-2,
fast.
and the Cubs went up 8-7. I think the next inning.
Yeah. And you should know better. You've been watching this all year. The White Sox are
Right.
one of the worst teams in existence right now. That's not hyperbole. And thank you for playing the Cubs
Right.
when they were going through the most important stretch of the year for themselves.
Yeah, but I mean, so we've got that game, which also included the Suzuki robbing the Grand Slam, which was incredible. Reminded me of Reed Johnson back in the day.
Yes.
Against Prince Fielder. But then in the Cardinal series, we start out the series by Miles Mikolas just being a complete fucking meathead. And I truly think he just went rogue. I don't think Marmol was like, hey, go hit Ian Happ. I really think that Mikolas was like, Ian's backswing injured my teammate who none of us really seemed to like that much. But nevertheless, it was intentional. And Ian Happ was trying to injure his friend, even though they hugged it out. I have to take matters into my own hands, buzz him up high, and then drill him with the most obvious hit by pitch maybe anyone's ever seen, and then chirp at the dugout.
Yeah, it was a thing where it was a bummer and unfortunate to see Haps swing catch Contreras in the back of the head. He was bleeding, eventually had to leave the game. But they did, as you say, they hugged afterwards. Ian said afterwards that he knows Wilson very well and they were good friends, so that's another maybe reminder to some of Cubs Twitter that we have fans who are like, I talked to a guy who talked to a guy and he said Wilson has bad vibes and that nobody likes him. It's fucking
and also,
incorrect.
Just to jump in real quick, you would think that whatever friendship they had got even stronger last year when they were the two guys who everyone thought was going to get traded. There's the famous, they don't get traded. They're hugging in the dugout. Like, I would think that would be a fairly unique shared experience to have gone through with someone. So however close they were before that, you would think that like bonded them even more. But all that to say, like, clearly they like each other.
Yeah, and that it wasn't intentional, and Wilson, if Wilson thinks something's intentional or is mad for any reason, he's not going to hide that. Like, Wilson, as we know, is as fiery as it gets, and he would have spoken up there and probably handled things himself if he thought Ian, and of course he didn't do it on purpose. And then Mikolas goes up and in. I think Ian knows what's happening here. And this is why throwing at guys is bad in general, because no one has perfect control and that could get out of hand up and in and be a real problem. And then the second hit by pitch, I guess, is if you're going to do it exactly how you do it, but also you get one shot, man. Like, that reminds me of the
Sean Estes.
Sean Estes
Clemens is one of them, yeah.
Estes against Clemens, and then I believe there's a Syndergaard one where they had Terry Collins and the umpire mic'd up, and your ass is in the jackpot.
Yes, it was Utley.
Yes, exactly. You get one.
It's the best quote since the bowling. Who do you think you are? I am.
It's just like nonsense, but. You don't get two shots, and there's a very good Cardinals journalist named Katie Wu, who is a good reporter. I read her stuff, but she was also acting like flummoxed by the idea that he would be thrown from the game as Chip Caray, who has anyone watched more baseball than Chip Caray without understanding it? It is just like
he should have some fucking feel for the game.
My God, the Vin Scully of Nepo babies, this guy, when it comes to announcers. It is amazing how bad he is, and I'm so glad he's gone. But how righteous he was, and then Katie Wu writing about like, oh yeah, well, it doesn't make sense why you throw him out, the feel for the game thing, and then just you can only throw him out if it's clearly intentional. If he threw it with intent, correct. Read what you just wrote, interpret it, and see what happened. So, yes, he should have been kicked out. Everyone thought it was a goof. Mikolas did say after the game that he considers Wilson a good friend now, specifically. So I guess it was just a he goes rogue thing. But obviously he was chirping. The Cubs dugout was laughing, and it's go ahead.
The Cardinals broadcast at the end of the first inning
Goofballs.
said, "Umpires 3, Cardinals 0."
I mean, perfect Cardinals vibes, where nothing's ever been our fault.
Right.
Nothing.
I
Nothing.
mean,
Yeah.
I do believe it was Eminem who said, "You only get one shot. Do
Yeah.
not miss your opportunity." And Miles Mikolas should heed that word.
He's the only rapper in the baseball rule book, and that is, kudos to him. But I think that's in a larger sense that game. Mikolas taking that into his own hands, basically gifting the game to the Cubs at the beginning of a big series, beating up the Cardinals' already bad bullpen because they had to pull the starter, and then between that, the Grand Slam robbery you mentioned of Seiya Suzuki, the Mike Tauchman robbery, those three events could be a swing of what? I mean, fully could be a swing of 3 games right there, which could have fully swung this to something of a sell instead of a buy.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's like now there's always this tendency to be like, well, like we are where we are now, so let's talk about Candelario and let's talk about Stroman struggling, and let's talk about this and that. But like, we should all, as Cubs fans, take a minute to be really grateful for the fact that this team took matters into their own hands with their backs against the wall, knowing full well, like these guys are not stupid. They know that a 5-5 road trip is going to mean this team's selling off.
They talked about it. Like Nico was talking about that. Nico and Hap both on the radio, heard him both on the score saying they specifically talked about that.
Yeah. So the fact that they were able to get back to 500 when that seemed so insurmountable. I mean, you've got them 10 games under after that series in Anaheim. They get all the way back to, they're up 4-0 in London. That second game, they're right there on the cusp of getting that rock back up the hill, as it were. And then the Mancini incident happens. They end up going on a really rough stretch. They get back to, I think, 7 under. They're 7 games under. They're losing to the Nationals. Then they score 17 straight runs, and they just kind of really haven't lost a lot since then. But I guess my point is, like, I also think that this could have happened the last few years. Like, I do not think, as much as I feel like Jed Hoyer has like biffed a lot of stuff, to borrow your word. I don't think that in any of his tenure, Jed Hoyer has wanted to sell. I think that he, in starting as early as 2021, aside from the Darvish trade, which I'll never fully understand.
Well, I mean, I think
going into the season, I think he wanted to buy.
I think I don't know how much I fully think that. I don't think he wants to lose at any point. I think the Darvish situation was mandated by ownership in a way that's unforgivable, in the same way that ownership, it's easy to think about the players, but when we talk about the Ricketts, you also have to talk about people who are willing to cut scouts for minimal money before the 2021 season, when scouts would be the most important leading up to that possible sell-off. This is an ownership group that did not care about winning at that time, and that's between cutting scouts and during the pandemic, and then the Darvish trade, that I still think, Owen Casey's a great looking prospect now. He's having a great year at Cub Prospects. Brian Smith he put up a thing that showed the best seasons by 20-year-olds since the turn of the century offensively at Double-A, and Owen Casey's right towards the top. He looks great. But unforgivable trade there. I still think Jed should have done better with it when you look at returns. I mean, like, Owen Casey looks great. That's the only major leaguer in that group. All the other 3 guys are completely off the prospect radar, and Yazon Santana's not even in the organization anymore. So he should have done better for 3 years of a controllable number 1 pitcher. That is huge. So but to your point about whether, that he never wanted to sell, I think he did want to turn the page to his own team. I do. I don't have proof of that. I think he feels like he wouldn't. I don't think he was ever like. I think, like you've referenced the Joker, I don't think he had this intricate plan to sort of, be bad for several years. But I do think he was ready to move on from a core for maybe, for whatever reason. I think he wanted his own full.
He Jerry Kraussed it.
Yeah, a little bit. It's Krause. It's been Krause, I think. Now I think Jerry Krause is. I think Jed Hoyer's not as psychotic as Jerry Krause was in that way. But I think the thing is, when Hoyer has wanted to win, and I fully believe Jed Hoyer wanted to win, especially this year, I think he's just not, he hasn't been good enough at figuring out how to do that. So, at this deadline, I mean, we should say at this point in the podcast who the big buy was, because this is a good move. The Cubs got Jeimer Candelario, who you might remember from the Chicago Cubs, who was a good Cubs prospect who was at the time blocked by Chris Bryant at third. He's a corner infielder, third base, first base. He was in the trade in 2017 where Candelario and, brace yourself, Isaac Paredes, who's killing it with the Tampa Rays right now, went for Alex Avila and Justin Wilson. So I should say at the time, by the way, the Cubs were pushing. Candelario was pretty close to the majors, but Paredes was a little ways away. Mm-hmm. And the Cubs were pushing for what could have been a championship team, and this was, and I was fine with that deal at that time, because you have to take the risk on trading guys who are farther away from the majors and try to maximize that value, because most of them don't really hit. Now, where your front office, your management has to come into play is you have to have an idea who's going to pop from your own organization. Right. So that deal does look worse now. But Candelario he's switch hitter. He led the majors in doubles with Detroit in 2021. Basically, TLDR, he was awesome in 2020, 21, and 23. He was bad in 2022. And if he's, the player he's been for most of the time, this is a straight up middle of the order good bat. He's been worth 3.3 WAR this year. And it's a good get.
It is, yeah, and I believe he's only signed through the end of the year, so who knows what happens after this year. Is that correct?
Yes, he's free agent, unrestricted free agent at the end of the year, just like Cody Bellinger, except that, the Cubs can't qualifying offer him because they got him in a trade. So he's full unrestricted free agent at the end of the year.
But yeah, I mean, I do believe he's led the NL in WAR for third baseman, has he not?
I mean, probably. I would think he's behind Arenado, but maybe not. I guess I don't have that pulled up right now, but he's up there. I mean, 3.3 WAR. I think it puts him just behind Swanson on the Cubs this year. Basically he's played the whole time. He hasn't missed the games that Bellinger has. Otherwise, Bellinger's been playing at an MVP level, but. He's if he's been as good as he's been to this point this year, this is such a huge thing the Cubs needed, which was for one more legitimate bat in this lineup.
Yeah, and also let's not be too dramatic. A couple of the hits last night was a bloop and infield single, but four for five.
Yeah,
I'll take it, baby.
Oh, 4-hit game's great. Candelario's never going to have 2 infield hits in the same game in his life again. And there was another bloop, and then he smashed a ball to left field that he thought was gone, and almost was. It went off the ivy, and then he had to hustle into second. But this is a good get. This is a good bat, and God, the lineup looks so much better when you put one more legit.
It really does, yeah.
Bat in there. Now we just have to order him a little better, but yeah.
Sure. But especially with Madrigal playing as well as he has, and also really kind of locking down third base, which I don't think any of us really saw coming defensively or offensively. I do agree. I feel like we're ready to transition to more negative stuff. Suzuki has been really struggling, and what in the hell is happening with Marcus Stroman? Is it an injury that is lingering from the blister thing? I mean, he's gone silent on Twitter, which concerns me for a number of reasons. First of all, I hate to get down on Stroman, but he really has the vibe of somebody who's all about talking shit when things are going well, and then just fully fucking disappears when things get tough. And I really don't like that.
I think that's just literally who he is and always has been. It's Alex Bregman is the same way, as to think of someone else who's like this. But it's Mr. Talkative until things go wrong, and he left before speaking to reporters 2 days ago after he blew up, and that's who Marcus Stroman is. I mean, it seems like, he and Steele seem to have a really good friendship on the team. They're always, tweeting back and forth about each other on each other's days, and that's great. Stroman's was great until the month of July, and then was basically the worst starter in baseball. An ERA of 9, I think, and never made it never made it through the 5th inning pitching. So I think it's there's a human element to this where he was maybe going to be traded for a lot of the month, and maybe
Mhm.
that is a thing that did mess with him and all that. And there was talk, the fact that the Cubs made it public through reports that they were not dealing Bellinger,
Mhm.
but didn't do the same with Stroman, I think is something that
Yeah.
could have affected him a little bit.
Well, it
Um,
seems that he took care of not being traded himself.
I mean, what a galaxy brain thing for Strowman to just suck all month. But again, after like a phenomenal first half of the year,
Hmm.
but in a in just a vibe sense of the guy, this is why I'm okay with the Cubs going in on a different top of the rotation guy going forward personally. I mean, this is we don't have to get into it more, but with his sort of coded anti-Semitic tweets where he never quite was fully saying the thing, but supporting Kyrie Irving,
Yeah.
and then being like, who controls the narrative, and then never responding to anyone about that. This is a guy who wants the conversation to be one way, who
Hmm.
pretends to be accessible. He's not. He's going to put his message out there, just like when he was saying, "I want a contract extension," when he was pitching at his absolute best. Which I
Hmm.
understand it. I understand being like, I've seen how this front office and other front offices have done things, pretended like players don't want to be here. I just want you guys to know I want to be here. But it's always very curated and crafted with Stroman. It's not the like everyman act that he puts on. So
Hmm.
that's one thing. The other thing is he's pitching bad, and he needs to figure that out. And if he doesn't,
Really bad.
really bad, like unplayable. Like, I mean, this month was worse than
Hmm.
Tyone's worst month. And if he continues pitching like that, guess what? He's picking up the option and staying with the Cubs next year for 21 million. Which is not something we've really considered, but that is in play.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I tell you what, I my feeling is one of the best ways to control the narrative is to fucking talk to the media.
yeah,
How about that?
how about that? Cash me in the press room. How about that?
How about
Like,
that?
yeah, it's just not accountable. I mean, the other players on this team, I don't think there's another player on this team that is ditched, that is like avoided the media in that way. And I'm
And to
sure.
and to that end, I mean, we talk about Trey Mancini being someone who struggled a lot, but by all accounts was a great dude. He after that game in London,
Yeah.
with all of that attention on a very big national slash international scale, he was he immediately stepped up and took accountability and was like, I don't care what else anyone else says, like they're gonna support me, but like this loss is on me. I screwed
Hmm.
up. Like I feel horrible and like I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's like even if Strowman shows up and has an attitude and is defensive or whatever, it to me it is unacceptable to be that bad and not take accountability.
Yeah. And who knows? He could be taking accountability to some degree behind the scenes with the
I
players.
hope so.
Oh, yeah, you hope. And maybe he is. But when you're dodging the media like that, it's, I don't know, a good way to spin that. And also, in terms of going forward, it gives me less confidence that you have it together going forward. And who knows what's going on in his life otherwise? There could be any number of things happening, but right now he doesn't have it. So I'll be very interested to see the next start after the trade deadline, when at least that's off his plate for right now. Now he's probably still thinking about his contract and being able to opt out and get a big
Hmm.
multi-year deal after this. So I'm sure that's still on his mind. But I saw some people being like, "Oh, Marcus Stroman can't pitch in big games," and I think that's not true. I don't think it's that the games are mattering getting to him now. I mean, this is a guy who we saw, whatever you think about the WBC, it mattered to the players. A guy who, like,
Hmm.
basically when the US won it, not this time, but the previous time, he was the ace for them and took it to the end. And he's been in playoff races before with the Mets and with the Blue Jays. I don't think that's the issue. I don't know what the issue is, but I'm really interested to see the next start, because if he doesn't have it, I mean, Tyone seems to be back, which is great news. But this is, the margins
We
are
didn't
too
want to
thin for
flip
this
flop
team.
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
we like that's the weird. I joked about it being some sort of Freaky Friday situation because it is like a complete reversal. Like
Yeah.
Jameson Tyone was getting to the point before that Yankees start where he was really kind of unplayable. Like
Hmm.
every fifth game, you were like, well, this is almost certainly going to be a loss because this guy's not going to get us out of the third or fourth inning. So,
Right.
um, yeah, it is disheartening, and especially like, we'll see how the next two nights go as we record this on Wednesday, but this is a huge series for the Cubs
Hmm.
who have gotten themselves into position to be back to 500, to be buyers, and then have a 4-game set against the team that you're trailing by what,
It was
four
by four.
games?
Yeah,
Yeah.
by four. Yeah. So basically, this is a difference. If the Cubs win the next two at home against Cincinnati, then it's 2 games between them. And the Brewers being in the mix makes it a little bit more difficult math, because if the Brewers keep winning, you got to keep chasing them too. But this is massive, because 2 wins against the Reds here can cut your gap with them to 2. But 2 losses pushes it all the way back to 6. Like, so these are, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
you need, at the very least, you need a split, but really you need to be winning the next two.
yeah, exactly. So, and then by the way, this weekend the Cubs play Atlanta, who is good. So,
Yikes.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a very tough series. But then you look at the rest of the month, and then other than the Blue Jays the weekend after next and the Brewers at the end of the month, the other matchups are against the Mets, who have like fully tanked and are selling off, the White Sox, the Royals, the Tigers, and the Pirates. And those are all games that should be extremely winnable. I was talking to my poor beleaguered Mets friend Adam yesterday, because we're going to go to one of the games next week. Just saying, like, I'm not even saying this to be mean, but if you had asked me, a diehard Cubs fan at the beginning of the year, these are the 2 records of these respective teams, or who was going to have a better record in August, I would have given the Cubs about a 1% chance for that to be the case.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, there were, I totally agree. And obviously the Mets sold off huge there. Like, Verlander gone, Scherzer gone. Like, they fully got rid of everybody. And very interesting to see Scherzer. I don't know if you saw, but talking
I did, yeah.
upon being traded to Texas, where he said, "Yeah, I had a conversation with the front office, and basically, he was like, are we going to be competing next year?" And they were kind of like, "No, like we're not. We're going for fillers. We're kind of doing like Cubs this year and last year, like short contracts, but not playing at the top tier of free agency. Right. So we're really aiming more at like 2025 or 2026." And it's just like, well, shoot, that's big news and interesting to hear. But also, while I say this, the Mets are as close to the Cubs in the standings as the Cubs are to the wild card. So thinking about how poorly the Mets have done, the Mets are only 3.5 back of the Cubs right now, and that's not the Mets team we're playing, but just as a heads up, because it's felt so good lately, and there is good reason to believe it's getting better, because the team is better now. Jeimer Candelario is a huge upgrade over whoever you would have hitting in that space, and that's enough to help that. But this team is a game over 500 still. The schedule you mentioned coming up, great. You win the games you should, you can be right in this thing. And I think they are in this thing. It feels like roughly a coin flip to get into the playoffs at this point. So yeah.
But I don't want my expectations to always be this low, but if you had told me that the Cubs would be adding at the deadline and seemingly playing meaningful games in August and hopefully September, I would have taken that coming into this year. I'll be honest with you. I would have taken, not what I want for this franchise in general, for that to be the baseline, but that would have made me happy.
And I want to be clear about how I phrase this, because I also would have taken it coming into this year. I'm enjoying watching the games right now. As you can tell, the vibes at Wrigley are really good. Watching the game yesterday was so much fun to see. Even watching the game they lost the previous day, where Morel came so close to hitting that ball out of the park that would have tied it up. Like, Wrigley's rocking right now. This is fun to watch them competing. And at the beginning of the year, I would have thought this is best case scenario. My frustration is that they're 1 game over 500, and that is the team they built. So I think I've compared it before to like giving a drunk driver credit for steering into a tree as opposed to steering into a school bus, where it's like, yeah, you did the best you could once you were in a position, but you shouldn't have drunk drove is the thing. Right. And I think the Cubs chose to drunk drive for the past couple seasons, and into this one, they at least buzz drove out of the off season into this, and so it's just like this is not what it. We should never be put in the position we've been put in this year and last year from this organization, but the players are doing the best they can with this, and they are fun to watch, and I'm rooting for all of them right now. And also, just man, this team loves giving up unearned runs when Justin Steele's on the mound right now. There was a scoring correction. The Nico Horner play at shortstop from a couple weeks ago was correctly ruled an error, so Justin Steele was the major league leader in ERA going into yesterday. How about that? And
not anymore, I would think, but
no, but there was also an unearned run given up yesterday. So,
right.
Anyway, it's fun to watch these players playing games that matter, and and it's going to be an interesting last couple months. And like you said, if you had told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have been like, wow, great.
Well, much as was the case last year when I saw those games in Cincinnati, knowing that I'm going to be at Citi Field for at least one, possibly two games next week, and in Toronto for the Friday game, I was definitely mentally preparing myself for like watching a bunch of AAA level players play in those games. So at the very least, I'm excited that the games that I will be personally attending will have some meaning to them. But yeah, look, I mean, obviously, if the Cubs end up missing the playoffs by 2 games, I'm going to be really frustrated. But at the very least, I hope that they stay competitive through the end of the year, and that it's not like, hey, we've come all the way back and now we're above 500 and now we lose 8 out of 10. And it's like, what was any of this even for?
Totally. And I think this is, if I'm predicting things, this is a truer representation of this team's talent. Like, I think I predicted 77, 78 wins for them at the beginning of the year. And I think they're a little better than I thought they were. And also, Candelario, I don't know, give me another win on that. Like just strengthening a position that way with the bat. I think, this is this feels like more of an 82, 83 win team right now to me. And you can get hot against this bad schedule and do even better than that. So that's fun. So you said we've got 2 games with Cincinnati, and then we got Atlanta coming up after that. It'll be an interesting week to see.
I mean, Atlanta is really, really, really good. If you told me that the Cubs could somehow go 3-2 in this stretch, I would absolutely take that.
Totally. I also I also would do that exactly, especially if two of the wins are against the Reds. If I could organize the wins that way, that would be perfect. Let me just a couple things I want to say before we end here. The Jeimer Candelario deal, who the Cubs gave up, depending on where you look. The organizational prospects ranked 14th and 16th, I think, by Pipeline. Fangraphs had him a little lower. We'll say Kevin Made was traded plus defensive shortstop. He's 20 years old. Had hit 10 homers last year, which is power no one really saw coming. So there was signs maybe that's a little breakout. But his OPS is under 700 at high A at this point. It's never been over 700. I am not worried about that at all. I wish him the best. Maybe he'll be a defensive replacement type shortstop at some point, but I'm not worried about that. DJ Hers, friend of the show, and you can check on our YouTube page. We have our whole podcast with him. We have up in video form from a couple years ago, because I gotta say, Adam, this show pretty good at picking prospects.
I think so. I'd say so. I mean, Steele's one of our guys. Yeah,
one of our first interviews on the show, and look where he is. But DJ Hers is 22. He's still working as a starter, even though most people project him to be a reliever, lefty. He has an ERA a touch under 4 at Double-A. For his career, he's struck out 360 in 240 innings. It is just a crazy amount of strikeouts, and
it's like an exact 3-to-2 ratio.
Yeah, it's bonkers. I mean, he was setting records with the strikeouts. He's low to mid 90s, but he has an extreme crossfire delivery, great changeup. I think, like, basically you can dream on him as sort of like a baby Hader out of the bullpen. And I think the Nationals might have gotten a guy who's really interesting there. We certainly enjoyed talking to him. Trades hurt. If you're making trades for real players, Candelario is maybe the best bat on the market. You got to give up something, And, hers was still probably ranked behind Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, Wisniewski, Cade Horton, as far as, and maybe Jackson Ferris, you could say too, as far as pitching prospects go. So I think this is an okay price, but it hurts to lose a favorite of mine.
Yeah, for sure. Seemed like a very nice guy. Definitely wish him the best, and I do think he has got a promising career ahead of him. And I think there's also a way to frame it where, if you're DJ Hers, I think part of you has to feel really good that a team wanted you enough that they were willing to give up somebody the value of Candelario for you. I guess it's a matter of how you frame it to say like, oh, well, I guess the Cubs are willing to give me up, but I think if anything, it's more like, no, I was the person that they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think hers was definitely had to be the main piece in this deal. And I think there's a good chance we could see him in Washington before too long. And I think that would be very cool. So see you later. Good luck to DJ Hers and his Cubs theme named dog, Ivy. His Ivy Hers, I believe, has a nice little social media account too. And Adam, can I, last thing I'll say, I'm going to make a prediction for one more Cubs edition, possibly, because I just saw Dallas Keuchel. Remember him? He is requested release from the Twins, which he could do as of like August 1st if they did not roster him. He's been pitching really well in AAA, and Dallas Keuchel, soft thrower, high ground ball guy with the edges of the Cubs rotation, with Drew Smyly sort of being in a piggyback situation right now. Wisniewski, they seem unsure about giving him a full starting job, and with Stroman's sort of inconsistency, I would not be surprised to see the Cubs try to go out and add a Dallas Keuchel. So just who knows, but that seems to be a fit to me. So I
like it. Yeah. You got anything to plug before we get out of here?
No, if you want to see, I've got a bunch of tour dates coming up. If you want to see me do some stand up live, just follow me on Instagram, really, at Kevin McCaff, and I got the links to all the shows and tickets up there.
Word. I'm going to be headlining Zany's Chicago for one night only on Tuesday, September 19th. And the Cubs do play that night, I'll be honest. So I know you'd have to pick me over the Cubs just for one night. But I do hope you'll make it. I would very much appreciate it if you come out, because it is just the one show. And then I'm hopefully going to go to the Cubs game with our buddy Ken Schultz the following night. Make a little mini trip out of it.
That sounds great. Also, by the time you're on headlining, it's 8:45. And the game starts at 7. So there's a good chance most of that game's over already.
It's possible. I think it's a 7:00 show, which feels weird.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I don't know why.
That might be a little
maybe I'll talk to them.
Yeah, exactly. But go.
Maybe I should do a day show, like a day game. I'll do a 120 stand-up show.
Oh, that would be great. A 120 start for the real ones out there.
It's a playground for the cocksuckers.
Follow Adam Mamawala. Hear all his cocksucker jokes at Zany's. Real classic Mamawala material, and his feature, the dead Lee Elia. So have fun. Go see him there. Enjoy the Cubs games this week at Away Games Pod. Follow us there, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks.